And then we have to give a second for Ray to log back on.
Sally, who's next to you that isn't here?
Don Starbuck.
And this is Archie. No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Josh Adamson couldn't be here today.
Josh Adamson couldn't be here?
Yes, Councilor President Adamson could not be here.
Well, I talked to Archie today. He's coming.
As far as I know, Councilor Garrett will be here. He said he might be just a couple minutes late.
Okay.
So Cascadia is going to do the presentation today. Tim is here, myself and Jana can help with questions that you have. If we do not know the answers because we're not experts in the code, we are going to write your questions down and get them to Henry, who's our LCOG representative, who then will answer all those questions and we'll get them back to him. He just could not be available today on
and these are just questions from
from you guys.
Council.
Yes.
It's a workshop, and as in the past, we don't have questions from the audience. All right, are we ready?
I'm ready. Ray, are you ready, Ray?
Yes, I am. Let me share.
All you.
So I'll call the meeting order, and now we will have the presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I just shared my screen. Is everybody able to see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Great. Well, thank you for having us back for our third work session to talk about the housing related code update work. I'm Ray Haggerty. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jamin Kimmel and Mary Phillips. We're with Cascadia Partners. We are an urban planning and land use firm, and we've been working with the community for a little over a year now on this code update work. The last time we met was in November, so I want to do a bit of a refresh on the project background and the purpose for this work, as well as sort of updating you all on what we've been hearing from the community and the advisory committee on the potential coding changes that we'll talk about today. Then I want to spend some time providing an overview of the proposed amendments in the public review draft that's in your packet, and then we'll shift to answering questions and hearing your feedback. So I would ask that you please hold on to your comments and questions until I wrap up the presentation portion. And then at the very end, we'll come together to talk about some next steps for this work. So starting with a little background, we began this work a little over a year ago to look at the development code and look at some potential changes to it to, one, expand the types of housing allowed in Bandon to be responsive to local housing goals, local housing need, and improve housing attainability. And two, to integrate state legal requirements into the code and bring the code into alignment with state laws. So there's roughly 3 phases to this work. We started off with an audit of the code to look for kind of places where the code isn't compliant with state law, and also look for barriers in the code that impact housing choice and housing affordability. Then we explored some different concepts for how to comply with state laws and how to support housing development. And now we're moving into the final stage of the project. And this is where we're really putting pen to paper and drafting code amendments that implement both statutory and these more kind of locally driven changes. This is a kind of a zoomed in project timeline focused on more recent months here. I think a few things to highlight on our timeline. The draft of code amendments that you received has been reviewed most recently by the advisory committee in March, and we'll be discussing them with the community at an event at the barn this Thursday evening. And then after that event, we'll take the feedback that we hear from you all, that we hear from the community, and we'll make some refinements to the proposed amendments and prepare an adoption-ready draft. So the primary goal for this meeting is really to get feedback to be incorporated into that next draft in the next month or two. As a quick reminder on Bandon's housing needs, this is really what's driving this work, is the housing need. This is data from your HNA from a few years ago. I think a key finding here is that there's a need for about 500 new housing units over the next 20 years to keep up with projected population growth. And a lot of that housing need, about 70% of it, needs to be housing types that aren't single unit detached. So housing like townhomes, plexes, ADUs, those middle housing types, and multi-unit housing and multifamily. About half of that housing need needs to be rental and the other half needs to be ownership. So really the bottom line is that there's a need for a mix of housing types beyond the kind of predominant single unit detached homes that are in Bandon now. And that will serve kind of people in the workforce, households of different sizes, people at a wider range of income levels. So one big goal for this code update is to really root the amendments in community feedback. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been hearing from the community. We held an event and we did a survey in fall of last year. We had about 20 attendees at the event and we got over 180 responses to the survey. So very great participation. And both at the event and the survey, we asked about support for some of the code amendments to allow for wider ranges of housing types, allow housing to be developed, at higher intensities than what's allowed now, and making changes like reducing parking requirements and lot sizes to make that more possible. Kind of changing some of the key barriers that we identified in the code that are related to middle and multi-unit housing development. And overall, we heard support for these types of amendments and really an interest in three key goals: supporting economic development, so kind of recognizing that connection between workforce housing and economic development, for ensuring there are housing options for the local workforce, and also a desire to maintain Bandon's character and feel. So not allowing new development that would feel kind of out of place or inconsistent with Bandon's current character. Specifically, participants in our engagement activities were supportive of middle housing types in more zones throughout the city. We also kind of heard support for allowing these housing types at what I would describe as a moderate density, a moderate intensity. So not as densely as they could be developed, but more with more intensity than what's allowed now. We also heard support for reduced parking requirements, also heard some concerns about that. And we also heard wide support for allowing vertical mixed use in Old Town. So allowing commercial to be on a ground floor and then housing above, for example. And when we reviewed the draft amendments with the advisory committee a couple of months ago, we got some very specific feedback. And I'll talk more about these items as I move through the presentation, but I want to share some comments we got from the advisory committee so that, when we kind of get to the discussion portion of the meeting, we can get your input on these items as well. One comment we heard is a suggestion to increase flexibility or intensity in the residential zones via an increase in lot coverage from 50%, where it is now, to 75%, potentially for all housing types. We also heard some feedback about the proposed design standards included in the draft amendments, that they might be too restrictive or too limiting. We heard that the proposed uses in the marine commercial zone, the C3 zone, might be too intense for the character and the intention of that district. And we also heard there was an interest in clarifying review thresholds for middle housing and subdivisions to make sure that there is a clear and objective path to approval. So I'm going to transition into the more detailed part of the presentation now. I'm going to move pretty quickly. We have a lot to cover, but I'll aim to do my best to give you a full overview of the code amendments and really the intent behind them. Starting with the legal compliance related amendments, I'm going to move especially quickly through these ones. These are the amendments that we've included to bring the code into compliance with state statute. This includes a few general updates that run through several sections of the code. One key one is that ensuring that all standards that apply to housing are clear and objective. So there aren't any vague provisions. There's not any elements of discretion as it applies to housing. We've also updated the definitions. There's new defined terms for housing types so that the distinctions between housing types is very clear for both staff and applicants. And there's a specific state statute about removing the requirement for the occupants of a home to be related. So what that means for amendments is updating the language in your code so there aren't different limits on the number of people who can live in a dwelling based on whether or not they're related, whether or not they're family. So those are three key updates there, kind of generally. We've made some updates to processes. There were some unclear thresholds for when a development application would be a plan review, which is a different kind of land use decision. So we've proposed some amendments to clarify that. We've proposed amendments to define review processes for non-conforming uses. So that is for uses that exist today, but don't conform with the code as it is now. For example, a home that might be partially in a setback. We've also introduced amendments allowing expedited review processes for affordable housing and allowing middle housing land divisions. The basic idea there is that if you build something like a duplex, you have the flexibility to divide the land underneath the duplex and sell the lot separately so that the duplex can be 2 ownership units. A few more legal compliance amendments. These are kind of use specific. There's a couple related to ADUs. One is updates to allow ADUs for vacation rentals that are single unit dwelling. That's required under state law. And then also making it clear in the code that no additional parking, off-street parking is required for an ADU. So nothing required beyond sort of what's already required for the primary dwelling. We've also included amendments to allow manufactured dwelling parks in all residential districts and to allow RVs to be used as housing in specific circumstances. These are our statutory requirements that have been added, as well as allowances for single room occupancies or SROs. That's kind of like dorm style housing. It's an older form of housing where residents might share a kitchen or a bathroom, but have their own bedroom. State law requires these to be allowed outright, so we've made that change. And then allowing affordable housing in commercial zones too, some allowances there. So that's a high level overview of the statutory amendments. I'm going to transition now into the more locally driven, policy driven proposed amendments. And the aim of these amendments is really to realize some community goals, supporting the workforce, supporting economic development, preserving Bandon's character. And we're really looking at amendments that do that through kind of 3 different levers. One is expanding use regulations to allow more housing types in both residential and controlled development zones, as well as commercial zones and light industrial zones. That also includes defining and allowing 2 housing types that are not currently defined in the code: cottage clusters and mixed use. The second lever is really bringing flexibility to development standards through changes like reductions in minimum lot size and setbacks, increasing height where that's appropriate, and looking at increasing maximum lot coverage, reducing parking, really allowing for intensity in strategic ways. And the third is design standards. There are some somewhat complex design standards in the existing code that are hard to adhere to and potentially not really resulting in the type of housing that kind of matches the character of Bandon in the way that the community wants. So we proposed a new set of design standards that we think might be a better fit, particularly for some of these higher density housing types. So this is sort of a snapshot of your zoning map. I think the big takeaway here is that the proposed intensities and amendments really aim to introduce kind of scales in density or intensity across these zones, starting with kind of marine commercial, the controlled development residential zones at the lower intensity end, these zones where there's environmental constraints or topographic constraints, where higher intensity housing just doesn't make sense. Then kind of moving to a more moderate intensity in controlled development and residential, and allowing for a little more intensity in commercial and light industrial, kind of along the highway corridor and in Old Town, places like that. And together, these scaled intensities reflect, input we've heard from staff, from the advisory committee, from the community, from you all in our last work session. And they aim to kind of support in meeting housing needs in places where there's buildable land and existing infrastructure. So this is a snapshot of the proposed allowances by type in the residential zones. These green icons are what we're recommending to be added to the allowed uses to be permitted outright. Gray is what's currently permitted. And I think the nuance that's kind of not really visible here is that many of the recommended housing types, many of those green icons, they are currently allowed to be permitted currently allowed to be built in these zones, but they have to be permitted conditionally. So there is a pathway to having them built currently, but it's not clear and objective. So in R1, for example, the code currently permits single unit detached, ADUs, and duplexes. So under the proposed amendments, that would be expanded to include triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and multi-unit housing. So the allowances for R1 would come into alignment with proposed allowances for R2, but the development standards between these zones would look different. So that a multi-unit development in R1, for example, through things like lot coverage and setback would look different than one in an R2 zone. We'll look a little more closely at that. The proposed amendments really aim to kind of introduce that higher intensity in R2 through kind of smaller lot sizes for triplexes and quadplexes and townhomes compared to the R1 zone. That's what's being shown in that lot size table there. Smaller lot sizes really make housing more financially viable, requiring less land. Really does translate to lower rents and home prices. So that's the intent behind kind of adjusting some of those lot sizes. The proposed amendments also reduce setbacks in both our residential zones to allow for a little more flexibility in how homes fit on lots, and include a small change in allowed height for the R2 zone to allow up to 35 feet outright, excuse me. So then looking at the housing allowances for controlled development residential and controlled development, that same kind of chart here. Similarly, the housing allowances would be expanded to allow for some middle housing types, but not multifamily. The proposed amendments don't allow for multifamily in these zones. So the development intensity here would be a little less than it is for the residential zones we just looked at. And when we look at the development standards, they would again be calibrated for a little less intensity, with lot sizes in controlled development zone kind of slightly smaller than those in the controlled development residential zones. Again, some moderate changes to setbacks and no changes to height. You know, we recognize that some of these places, especially around the periphery of the community, might be really impacted by taller buildings. And in those places, increasing the maximum height might not make sense. So the proposed amendments recommend keeping heights the same in these districts. Looking at the commercial and light industrial zones, today in these zones, housing is a conditional use. It's not allowed under clear and objective state requirements. So in discussions with staff and the community, we heard that it might be appropriate to allow housing outright in these zones. The idea would be for housing to slot in where maybe industrial or commercial development isn't viable by the market, and sort of take advantage of that available land to meet housing need. So there's a little bit of a distinction in these allowances. The C1 is the Old Town area. So the proposed allowances are really limited to mixed use and multifamily and SROs per state law. These housing types that are kind of more compatible with a compact downtown, where housing might create more activity and more liveliness near businesses. Compared to the C2 and the C3 zones, where we are recommending sort of a wider range of housing types be allowed, as well as in light industrial, which is mapped for light industrial use now, but there might not be a market for that use. So looking again for those opportunities for housing where there's buildable land in that zone. The standards in these zones are calibrated for a bit more intensity compared to residential and controlled development. A few key proposed standards here. One is that the proposed amendments include a height increase in the C1, the Old Town area, of up to 50 feet. The current standard is fairly restrictive at 28 to 35 feet right now. But in order to allow vertical mixed-use development, a 50-foot height is pretty typical. That's kind of appropriate for a 4-story building, which might have a business and housing above. Some recommended changes to maximum lot coverage, increasing to 100% in commercial and light industrial. And proposed amendments include introducing a minimum residential density in the C2 zone of 20 units per acre. The purpose of this recommendation is to ensure that new housing in this zone is using land efficiently, and to help ensure that higher intensity housing is landing in the places where it's most appropriate throughout Bandon. I'll shift into talking about the proposed off-street parking requirement amendments. We've proposed some minor changes to off-street parking requirements that are highlighted in green on the right side of this table. One is a proposed reduction from 2 spaces to 1 space for single unit detached homes in zones that allow for this higher intensity housing. So in commercial or light industrial, but not in residential or controlled development zones. Another is a reduction from 1.5 spaces to 1 space per unit for plexes and multi-unit housing. That's kind of consistent with the idea that we want to support these housing types and make it, provide the flexibility needed to make it easier for them to fit on existing lots. Reducing the amount of a lot that is sort of needed to be used for parking does really kind of make a difference in helping homes sort of fit better on existing lots. But keeping the one space per unit requirement, so not completely eliminating parking or taking away off-street parking requirements. We've also proposed some parking requirements for SROs. That's kind of in line with state requirements there. And I want us to talk about design standards. That's kind of our last element of the proposed amendments before we take questions and feedback. I mentioned a little bit earlier that the existing design standards are complicated. They're not always kind of encouraging the type of housing or sort of the look that the community wants to see. So we're recommending replacing them with a set of design standards that are clear and objective, and making sure that there are clear and objective design standards and a pathway for housing that is clear and objective in the architectural overlay zone in the Old Town area. So adding in that pathway as well. The purpose of these design standards is really to encourage kind of visual cohesion, make sure that housing fits into the neighborhoods. It looks like it naturally belongs there. And to ensure that walking by new housing is a pleasant experience, making the pedestrian experience feel safe and welcoming, and maintaining Bandon's charm and coastal small town character. So looking at design standards that are going to be really responsive to what we heard from the community, which is that they want to maintain Bandon's character as a part of this code work. So I'll get into some specifics on some of the proposed design standards and their purpose, and we'll show some examples here. So the first is driveway and garage standards. These address the width and the location of driveways and garages by limiting the width of garages, for example. And the goal here is to make garages kind of a less prominent element on the street and enhance safety and just sort of the feel. It feels better for people walking. So you can see this example of a home sort of without that standard versus with, and how the garage is kind of less prominent. Another category of design standards are entry and orientation standards that would require entryways to orient to the street rather than to a side yard. Similarly to the last photos, you can see how when these standards are included, when there's entryways towards the street, it feels more engaging. In the example on the left, where there is not an entryway on the street, it feels kind of disconnected from the community, from the sidewalk. A little less friendly for people kind of walking or driving by. Building facade standards are also included, and these would require windows or doors on this, X 15% of the facade to be windows and doors. And this is the street-facing facade. And similarly, this sort of creates a more friendly feel. It helps avoid having blank walls right next to the street. And again, kind of improves that safety and that walking experience for a pedestrian. Lastly, there's a set of design standards related to cottage clusters. This is a housing type that's newly defined in the proposed amendments in your code. And this is a cluster of kind of smaller cottage-sized homes that orient around a shared space like a courtyard. It's a little bit of a different, maybe less conventional site design compared to some other middle housing types. But I think the success of a cottage cluster does kind of depend on that good site design. And the proposed standards aim to encourage that by regulating things like the size of the required courtyard, making sure it's at least 15 feet wide, to establish a nicely sized space that's going to be usable by residents. Requiring that cottages orient to the courtyard to kind of foster interaction, create that's like a nice space away from traffic that feels kind of like a little neighborhood gathering space. And also requiring parking to be on the periphery of a cottage cluster and screened. So the cottage cluster is kind of oriented around this courtyard, not around a parking lot, which kind of improves kind of the aesthetics and the feel of these sites, but also improves safety too. Here you can see an example of a cottage cluster with these standards, where the cottages are kind of facing that courtyard. The parking is tucked out of the way. It's not very visually prominent. And with that, I want to pause. I know I moved very quickly. I just wanted to leave us lots of time to talk. So I want to we have some discussion prompts that I want to pose to you all to get your feedback on these proposed amendments. But first, I want to ask if there are any questions that we can answer, if there's anything you'd like clarity on or more information about.
Yes, I do have a question.
Great.
I mean, a lot of the things that you were saying sound like,
Jessica,
yes.
you can't talk right now. It's just council and commissioners. So hold on.
Okay, well, I'm in the meeting and they said, did anybody have anything to say? And I had
I
a
know,
question.
but it's not, yeah. So hold on. It's commissioners and counselors.
Apologies, I didn't clarify that. Thank you.
Does any commissioners or counselors have any questions?
Matt does.
I think this is on.
Don't worry, it is. We can.
I had a few questions here. I had a hard time telling which one of your specific to the, rather than just general statements, which of the changes that you're proposing are optional versus required by the ORS or just consistent with the ORS? I mean, I had a hard time figuring out how much was just as a result of the hearings and as a result of your work. But I couldn't tell what was consistent with or required by or optional in terms of the ORS, because if I know which ones are the ORS required, then they're required. And, it'd be nice to know which one of those we can really work with, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's certainly a good question. And let me go back and I can try to use a visual to help explain this. There is a slew of amendments, particularly the ones on these two slides, this one and this one that I walked through, that are required by state statute. The amendments that are related to allowances, some of the changes to development standards and design standards are a little more complicated. For example, housing cannot be allowed conditionally. It either needs to be allowed or not allowed. So that's a sort of a required change to your uses. But exactly what shape that takes and exactly what is allowed, there is some more flexibility there in terms of sort of being responsive to what makes the most sense for the community. I welcome Jamin or Mary if you have kind of additional context here to help explain the distinction. Please jump in.
I think you gave a great overview of that, Ray. I'll just add that for the uses, the duplexes are required to be allowed where the single detached housing is allowed. The SROs, the single room occupancies, are tied to being required to be allowed if you allow single detached units or multi-unit housing. So there are a few kind of more nuances that the ORSs, the state statutes, kind of tie to other uses. But for the most part, as Ray outlined, some of the flexibility comes into play and the choices come into play on those other housing types. The other types of middle housing are great options for housing that's going to be more affordable or more attainable. And so that's why those are recommended to be allowed, but not all of those. Only the duplexes are required to be allowed by the state. And then the design standards themselves, we are recommending updates to the design standards because the state requires they be clear and objective. So the language in them needs to be updated. But what exactly is regulated by the design standards is still a flexible local choice. And what we were recommending is based off of what we heard from the community and from our previous work sessions with council and the project advisory group about wanting to be sure that these new housing types that are needed in the community are still going to be consistent with the existing community character and still feel like Bandon.
I got another question. ADU parking, you're not proposing any additional parking for ADUs, I assume. I think that's what
That's
you're is in here.
correct.
Is that right?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Where do they park?
So that one is
State?
also one of the state requirements.
You can't require off-street parking for like two. You see, the majority of people in town have two vehicles. So I'm maybe not majority, but an awful lot of people have. Maybe it's more majority. I don't know. Anyway, have two vehicles. So how do you propose to handle those situations? Where if you're required, what are people consistent with most of these zones? I'm looking at a lot of changes, but for example, general commercial, you've moved conditional use in the C2 zone to a permitted use. Is that required by the statutes?
So which use, can you repeat that? In C2?
Yeah, I mean, you've got it in the marine commercial and the light industrial. They've all moved from conditional to just permitted or not permitted to permitted.
Yeah.
There's not a whole
So
lot of conditional uses in here.
She said.
yeah, so as Ray outlined, one of the requirements from the state is for housing, it has to have a clear and objective pathway to being built. So it can't be a conditional use. You're either going to allow the housing or type or not allow the housing type in the district. For your question about the parking, part of this is that the state has certain requirements that must be met, but some of the reason behind those requirements are that having less parking can make the housing more affordable to develop, but it's also leaving the choice to provide that parking up to the builder. So by not requiring it, it doesn't mean you're not necessarily going to get it. It means it's a more local decision for development by development. So maybe there's an area that has a lot of on-street parking, and so they choose not to add the off-street parking. Maybe it's an area where there isn't a lot of on-street parking, so the developer would choose to build the off-street parking. It makes it a case-by-case choice rather than a mandated
I think if you
decision to
drive
build
through
it.
neighborhoods in town and look at the parking, where people have a double car garage or at least two cars in the driveway or something to accommodate two vehicles, if you had a development, for example, that had, various types of housing, no matter which one you want to pick, if people are parking on the street, and is that required by the code, by the statutes? That people
The state statutes basically just limit the amount of off-street parking that you can require. It doesn't say what else can be decided upon locally and development by development, just how much the city itself can require to be built with certain housing types.
Yeah, because but I don't know. I can't really tell from this. I guess I could dig in there someplace and find it. But I couldn't really tell what's required and what you guys are just recommending outside of being required by. Because if it's required by the ORS, then there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it is what it is required to be. Right? I see no.
And Mary and Ray, I might step in here, see if I can try to clear that up. I'm Jamie Kimmel. I'm a principal with the firm here. So I think that really the main things that are more substantive changes here that are required by state law are the parking for ADUs, not that the city can't require that. The single room occupancy housing that must be permitted pretty much wherever you allow housing. And you must allow duplexes, but that change has already been made last year. I'd say those are the three key changes. And then a lot of the other changes in the code related to manufactured dwelling parks is another one. and having clear and objective standards. I'd say those are sort of less consequential in terms of what form of development is likely to happen in Bandon. And so most of what you're seeing here on the screen and the changes to development standards like height and setbacks and parking, with the exception of the ADU parking, most of that is a local policy decision. And I'd say we've developed these with some input from the advisory committee and your city staff and response from the community. And so this is our sort of take at what we think makes sense for Bandon based on what we're hearing. But it's not just our recommendation that matters here. We really want to know, does this make sense to you? Does this feel like the right amount of change? Is this the right mix of housing types? And that's why we're here today. So if you have suggestions for some of these things that aren't required to change, we'd love to hear that.
Right, but if I knew which ones were.
I want to hear from Sally.
I just have a question about maximum lot coverage. I noticed that we discussed 75% on the chart. I only see 50% maximum lot coverage.
Yes, 50% is what's required now. And we sort of brought that recommendation and sort of want to talk about that with the Planning Commission and Council today, and sort of hear that take. But yes, that is something that the advisory committee recommended increasing. That change isn't incorporated into the code amendments in your packet, but potentially could be if there's support for that change.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question about, I didn't see it up there, but the Woolen Mill area, the proposed height would be 60 feet. Is that correct? Did
Ray,
they?
I can take this. I took a closer look at it. Yeah, you're referring to the there's a light industrial
Yes.
district there. Yeah. So that area was brought up by the former community development director as seems like a really good opportunity for some housing development. And the idea was that because that area sort of sits down under the bluff below it, that some taller buildings in that area may not really have an impact on the views surrounding it. And with that in mind, that going from the current maximum height of 45 feet, increasing that to 60 feet, would allow for up to a sort of 4 to 5 story building in a place that wouldn't have a lot of impact on the surrounding neighborhood. So that was the idea behind it, just to give you a little bit more context.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me, but now are they saying that you've lowered it to 50 feet? I know
No, I think
60, but
it says 60 in here, but up there, when we saw it a little while ago, it said 50. I'm trying to figure out if you're
Yeah.
recommending that it be lowered to 50.
the slide you saw was referring to the C1 zone, which
I
is
think
that's
it's
actually
Old Town is 50 feet.
Old Town. Yeah,
Old Town is
that's 50 feet. But
Proposed.
the LI light industrial zone, that's proposed for 60 feet.
So that would accommodate a hotel.
Of course it would.
That certainly would. Yeah, 60 feet can generally be up to about 5 stories.
I mean, it makes sense.
But how
that
many areas in town?
It would just be that one area, the
The
60
mill
feet.
area?
Yes, the 60 feet
Well,
would not extend to anywhere else, would it?
Let me clarify that the change
Light
would be to the
industrial
base
up on the-
zone district. There are other places where that zone district applies. So if you had concern about building that tall in other parts of town, then we would need to write it differently to apply like only to that area if that's the intent.
And I'll add for the light industrial height, we're still proposing to maintain 45-foot maximum height when you're within 150 feet of a residential zone.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
It wouldn't work.
No.
Could you pull up that zone map that shows the
Different zones.
the different zones? So we could see, I thought there was 3 areas that were light industrial. It was just like the park, the school, and
Okay, which color is it? I don't have good eyes.
the yellow.
Yellow, okay. Well, there's one.
It looks like the
Yeah,
city
it's sort of
park,
the more
the
tan
school,
yellow.
the
The
baseball
brighter yellow
field.
is not light industrial. That's public facilities.
Oh,
What she say?
so the light yellow is public facilities. So the dark
Yes,
yellow, just kind of the
See a light.
woolen mill.
I don't see. They're not many of them.
No, there's not much
No.
light industrial property, so it isn't going to cause a
But
big,
there's City Park and what's the one right in the center?
No, that city
It's-
park
it's not like-
not part of it.
that's public
Not part-
facilities.
Okay, all right.
That's,
Bottom color.
it's
No, I know,
confusing,
but
but
it's
it,
very
but
confusing.
yeah, because it looks like the park. So it's basically the light industrial isn't in other parts of town. It's up, it's in the woolen mill and up on the hill where Stadelman is, and
Right.
that's light industrial.
Okay,
So
so
it's-
that's like the Fillmore area.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does look like there's maybe some up on 101 there though.
In the hospital, isn't it?
Huh?
Between
Are you
Fillmore
able
and the
to zoom in
hospital.
or no?
Ray, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I can switch over to a larger version of this map. I've got it open.
Would you please?
Mhm.
Thank you, Jamin.
Mhm.
While he's doing that, I have a question on parking. So ORS basically states that we cannot require parking for an ADU, off-street parking for an ADU. Is that correct? And that's the only requirement by the ORS as far as parking's concerned?
There is one or two more. Duplexes, you can't require more than one space per unit, I believe.
Okay.
And then for single room occupancy, it's a bit complicated, but it's basically equivalent to what you would require for every 4 multifamily units, I believe. Mary, correct me if I got that wrong. But there is a specific standard for duplex and single room occupancy.
I have a question on single room occupancy. What's the maximum occupancy per room? Is that defined?
So that would be controlled by around your definition of a dwelling or let's say a definition of a household, I believe, which I don't recall what the actual occupancy limit per household is. But whatever the limit of
That's
number of people
defined
in
in our
a
code.
household. I have to say though that there are other limits in the building code that would apply based on the number of people that are expected to live in a unit, and so there's those aren't in the zoning code.
Bill, you said something else. I didn't, you guys were talking at the same time. What did?
Oh, so there's no state standard on that. It becomes a local code standard as far as total occupants allowed per single detached unit. Is that correct?
single room.
Yes, the only state law that pertains to that I'm aware of is that you can't regulate the number of people in the household based on whether they're related.
Come again with that.
Based
I
on-
lost the thread there. You can't do what?
Oh,
So you
based
can't
on-
limit the number of people in a household based on whether or not they're related. You can limit the number of people
Okay.
that live in one household or dwelling unit, but it can't be based on if it's a family, you can have 12 people, but if it's not a family, you can have 6 people. You can't do that. It has to be either way, one
Okay.
sort of equal standard.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So basically what you're saying is a single room occupancy does not have a state defined limit.
I don't believe so.
Mhm.
So this is the light industrial map. I don't know if you can see that on your screens there. Is that clear for everyone?
Okay, yeah, I can see.
The zoning map. So the LI, there's some property here.
You?
There's this property here.
There's 4 spots,
sure
it
we
looks
see.
like.
Yeah.
One spot there on 101,
So 101.
like where the grocery outlet.
Hooks up by 11th, and I don't know where Fillmore comes in, but I just see those 2 areas. You're counting lot? Are you counting?
Just 4 spots.
With that color,
Yeah.
I've seen.
Then there's one like Old Town where the cheese factory is there basically.
Well, that's the one I think I'm
Yeah.
seeing that one on 101.
Yeah, there's also a 101 though up by like where grocery outlets coming in there.
Oh, yeah.
This,
You see that spot?
this map doesn't go that far south, does it?
Yeah, it does.
It does?
Right near the donut hole.
Yep. And then there's also one on Riverside Drive there.
Well, yeah, that's Jens's mill.
Right.
I still don't see the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
What, okay, see where Old Town is in the dark purple?
Yep.
And then towards the left, you'll see like a parcel that's, I don't know even what color to call that.
Light blue?
No. Come south from the dark purple on the left.
Yeah.
It's like a yellowish orange, I don't know.
That's light industrial.
That is light industrial there, and that's
Where
in
is
Old
that?
Town then. Huh?
No, not down there.
No, that looks like that looks like CD1.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
okay.
That's better.
Yeah, much better, thank you. Okay,
Yeah, there's no light industrial down in Old Town.
no, okay. So it's just like up by the Stadelman's and Rose Road and then down by the Chief. Okay,
And on 101 where grocery outlet
Yeah.
area.
I still don't see that one, but okay, yeah, all right,
Thank you. Oh, I
Thanks.
see. I see where it is.
yeah, by the purple.
Yeah. Questions?
Did I see, thank you. Did I see on one of your slides a statement that the state requires that ADUs be allowed on property that is a vacation rental dwelling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw that.
If the vacation rental dwelling is a single detached home, then yes, ADUs are required to be allowed for all single detached home, regardless of whether or not it's a vacation rental home.
Just a little nuance there that the statute doesn't actually distinguish between whether it's a single unit dwelling that's used as for permanent occupants or as a vacation rental. It just says for any lot where you allow a single unit dwelling, you must also allow an accessory dwelling unit. But if jurisdictions that have been concerned about ADUs being used as short-term rentals, a sort of appropriate mechanism to regulate that, if you were concerned about that, would be through short-term rental permits and licensing and caps of those. Those are kinds of things that would be operate outside of the zoning code and wouldn't necessarily constrain someone from building an ADU, but might constrain them for using it as a short-term rental.
Code is written says they can't use it. The short-term rental, right?
Right.
No, it's written that you can use the ADU as a long-term rental or you can live in it, but you can't.
That's what it says. Well, it's one or the other.
Well, I thought that, I mean, the reason I wrote that down, that, because there's nothing in there that says you can't use them both.
Well,
There's nothing in there that says you can't use them both, because if they fall within the 30% within 250 feet. I looked at it and I went, I don't think that's right.
That's not what
I
I
put
said.
a note, I'm trying to find the notes and the place where I saw it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean,
Second.
I'm looking at the section now. Let me clarify. So the amendment we made here is that the current code states that accessory dwelling units are prohibited on properties designated as vacation rental dwellings. And that is what conflicts with the state law, because some of those properties will be properties that have a single family house on it, and it's not permitted for the city to limit an ADU from being built on those sites. What we recommended as an amendment was that the code allow for at least one ADU to be built on dwellings that are designated as vacation rental dwellings. So that brings it into conformance with state law Now, if there are concerns about the use of those property, that ADU as a vacation rental dwelling, that's something that couldn't really be operated through the zoning code. It would have to be operated through the short-term rental registrations and licensing.
So it doesn't throw out our ordinance altogether. Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Steve?
I had a question. On wetland protection standards, that's chapter 17.102, pages 134 to 135 in your document. Capital letters A through capital letter I are left blank. And I was just wondering about that.
Somebody up there have an answer?
Yeah, Mary, I want you to jump in there unless you've got it open.
I'm trying to pull up that section of the
Okay.
draft right now.
Yeah. Actually, I found it, I think.
What page?
Yeah, so in our document 131, what you'll see there is that wherever when there is a bracket with 3 dots, what that is intended to do is to identify that no amendments are proposed in that section, but the header of that section is retained in there so that it's easier for you to track where you're at in the document. So no changes are proposed to any of those sections A through I, and then changes start to be proposed in section J, I believe, which is really just a minor wording change.
I'm going to ask another question about that 75% coverage. The reason that we, as the home advisory committee, wanted it to be a larger percentage was because if we're saying we can have a smaller lot, if you only allow 50% coverage, you're not really achieving what you want. If you have a smaller lot allowed, and then you say you can only have 50% coverage, then you're really not attaining the size house or the type of housing that you want for people if you don't have a larger percentage allowed to be covered. So I'm just surprised you changed that.
So that was actually one of the questions that we had for you, was the public review draft was 50%, but based on the advisory committee's feedback, we were bringing that question to you with their recommendation for 75%. So we wanted feedback directly from Planning Commission and City Council on that 75%.
I just wanted to explain why we wanted it 75%, because if you're saying the lot is smaller, then you're going to end up with really tiny houses if you say that only 50% coverage of that lot with all the other setbacks and everything.
I don't think they changed it on any of the residential.
We didn't incorporate that change, but we do want to hear if there's support for that increase in lot coverage, that recommendation to increase to 75% in R1 and R2. And if there is support for, is that for all housing types or maybe just for middle and multi-unit housing types? So we welcome your thoughts on that.
Would you guys care if you change it to 75% is what she's asking you? From 50% for what kind? Single, family, multi, what else?
Well, I do think she brings up a good point. If we make the lot size smaller, but you can only use 50% of it, does it really give you many options to, split lots in half and then still build there?
Or make the appropriate size house for the needs of the people.
Yeah.
They would go up though, right?
Yes.
Well, no, because the height, well, I guess on R2 it does go up, but the rest of them all stay the same.
You can go up, you're right. I did for my house, but not everyone wants a 2-story dwelling. And it's not, I guess I don't want to limit that for everyone. We're trying to make this easier for people.
So you'd like to make it for all the stuff, you'd like to make it 70.
Unless you can persuade me, yeah, I would personally say yes, but if you all feel differently, I'm not telling you you have to listen to me. I'm just saying that is why we wanted it that way.
I'll listen to you.
But with the 75% work, it's on. Would, shut up, Chris. Would the 75% work for all areas of the city that would be able to use that 75% to build? I don't know. You guys in the planning commission study those maps a whole lot more than I do.
I can't think of any problems, but I'm
If you just, yeah, if it was applied to all the residential, I don't
Right.
see it would make much difference.
I don't either.
Great.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you're in favor of the 75%. The other part of that question was, should that apply to all housing types or just middle housing and multi-unit housing?
Well, multi-unit housing, I would think for sure. So they could get as many units on the property as they can.
I agree. And even the cottage clusters and,
Yeah.
yeah, I do. I'm not sure I see any downside to allowing 75% coverage. No one's saying they have to cover
No,
that
no.
much. It's just allow them the option of doing it.
They can go up to 75.
Because we are trying to make this easier for people and we are trying to increase the amount of housing that will be built.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. All residential should be 75%. I don't,
Well, this being a work session, we can't take a vote, but we can recommend that they change
yeah.
their proposed document.
Yep.
Is
Yeah.
that the
Yeah,
cons-
that's the kind of input we're looking for today, just to make sure it's clear. Yeah, we're not voting on any of these amendments. We're
No.
we're looking to get your final input, and we're going to go out to the community later this week and get some input from them, and then we're going to talk with staff, and then we're going to sort of finalize our work and hand off the amendments to staff, and they'll be adopted at a later date, which you can continue to make changes there. But we want to get you as close as we can to something you feels like is right for Bandon.
Thank you. I just feel more comfortable because the goal is to make it easier and not harder. And if we're decreasing the size of the lot, I just feel like it would be making it harder.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is this the last time you're going to make changes to this document? The next time you come back to either the planning commission or council or both will be the final draft? Or is there something in between?
I'd like to
This
see,
is
I'd like to see at
yeah,
least one more meeting.
I would too.
I'd really like to see some input from some of our property professionals,
Yep.
like Sherry McGrath
Yep.
and maybe Dana Boardman, maybe Dave Reed, people that work
Yes.
in the community and have been here for a long time and
Right.
understand these changes and how it's going to impact us.
I agree with Bill, but I don't know what their time frame is on their contract. That's why I'm asking.
yeah. So this is our last scoped meeting with you all. And so that doesn't mean this is the last time that you all can change these amendments. So we're hoping at this stage, most of the 90% of the work is done there that has to be done, and that gets you most of the way there. If you were to want to make additional changes after this, then that'd be maybe your city staff would need to take that work on. If there's a desire to get some more input from others to feed in back to us, then we'd be glad to take that. We'll have to have city staff reach out to them and collect that input and pass it on to us. Or have them attend the community workshop on Thursday as well, and they could talk to us then. So yeah, we do get one more pass at changing the document, but that doesn't mean that's the one the document, and set of amendments you have to adopt. It's just your city staff that have to take on future changes.
Okay, everybody in the room, do you feel that we need another one of these work sessions like we're having right now before the final draft is drafted?
Yes.
I think it would be helpful.
I think so too. Chris,
Absolutely.
Archie?
Hmm?
Bear? Bill?
Yes.
Matt?
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve? Tom? Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yes. Okay, so can we have our office arrange another work session with the council and the commission?
Yes,
Your company?
no. Once
No?
this meeting is over, they're done with us. We only have 2 more meetings for them, this one and the open house. So any meetings that we would like after this would just be like this, and then we can invite Sherry, Dave Reed,
The
housing-
The home advisory
the whole,
committee would be.
the rest of the housing advisory committee and sit down with the final draft that they're sending us.
And then who's gonna make the changes on the final draft when we change it?
City staff.
City staff,
You're gonna do it.
yeah, myself, and then Henry Alcog will help as well.
Okay,
Once I get input from Dave Reed, Sherry, and then the housing audit committee that has spent time with this, that knows all that.
okay.
We can have
And,
all them present and do one final after they send our final, their final to us.
Then we can schedule this meeting.
Then we
Then we can
schedule-
ask like Sherry to come and
Yes.
speak. Who else did you want to come, Bill?
I think Dana Boardman would be helpful. Dave Reed, perhaps, maybe some other folks that somebody can think of that, you know, are
I think
involved.
what I'll do is I'll look at I'll get with Jana and we'll see which contractors are used, that are used a lot besides Sherry.
Mhm.
And I would
And
like,
Dave Reed
sorry, I'm interrupting.
and the housing.
Yes.
Housing audit committee
Yes.
was very involved in this as well.
No, I know they were.
So we can
Okay.
we can
right.
find those contractors.
So we can let them go because,
Well, once they're done, they're not all done with.
oh,
their
you're not
stuff.
done yet? Thursday meeting. No, I know that, but it's a town hall, so we can't go through really pertinent stuff.
What's being presented at the Thursday meeting? What is the presentation going to be like?
You have to speak up so they can hear you.
Talk in the mic.
Sorry, I had to reach out. What's going to be presented at the Thursday meeting and what kind of presentation is that going to be?
At the Thursday meeting, we'll do a presentation similar to this. It'll be a little less technical and detailed, but we will kind of review the full breadth of proposed code amendments, talk about housing need and community feedback, and then similarly kind of have a discussion and solicit feedback on what the community supports, what the community doesn't. We'll have boards for dot voting to collect feedback that way as well, and time for some kind of informal discussion at the end.
Okay, you're collecting feedback at the town hall meeting. So are you going to take that feedback into consideration when you're drafting the final draft? Because we haven't seen that yet.
Yes.
So you're going to take whatever you take from the town hall meeting, bypass us, go into the final draft.
So the final draft that we provide to city staff, yes. So we're going to take your feedback from today, the feedback from the advisory committee, the feedback we hear from the community on Thursday, and talk with staff, and that'll inform the final draft that we Cascadia provide to staff, but it sounds like staff will work with you again. So it won't necessarily be the final draft, but it'll be the final draft from us.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
I had a question for you folks. So regarding view lines, I noticed there are a number of instances where protection of views that is in the current code were deleted altogether. There are other cases where limitations on use also referred to minimizing negative impacts on views were also deleted. So I was just wondering about that, the deletion of all of those instances where views are protected have been deleted from the document we're looking at.
So for most of those instances that I believe you're referring to, the language was not clear and objective. So per the state requirements, it couldn't stay in as is. So it needs to be limited to just clear and objective standards to do that. So that's why the other limitations on the sites. But that was based on state requirements that you have to have clear and objective standards.
So view lines were no longer protected,
What
you're proposing?
for the specific areas that I think you're referring to where it was to the extent feasible, that's kind of language is not clear and objective. So per the state statutes, that kind of language has to come out. I believe that you might have one statewide planning goal protected area for a view shed that was more clearly defined, and that was still in there. But the ones that didn't have that statewide planning goal protection needed to be clear and objective, and the language that was in there was proposed to come out because it wasn't clear and objective, and that view protection has to then rely on things like height and setbacks that can be made numerically clear and objective.
So you're saying we can't have that kind of language in our document, or yes, we can, but we have to do it differently, or we have to write it differently?
I was going to say, I think
We have to write it differently so it's clear and objective. Yeah.
Okay, we need that.
I think that people have had committees for that purpose in the past and nothing has been achieved yet. I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying there has been effort and there have been people on a committees formed specifically for that. And it just was never attained to a clear and objective standard. So if somebody can come up with it, it sounds like it's loud.
It's my personal opinion that we do need to come up with something.
Well, I think this basically addresses it, but I have a question on part of the verbiage. It says new structures shall be built in line with other existing structures and not extend farther out into those ocean or river view sheds identified in the comprehensive plan. But then it also, and there's a question for them, I'm not sure why you put in unless necessitated by topographic constraints. Is that your suggestion or is that a state standard?
I would have to look at the specific one you're referring to. The unless by topographical constraints would have to be clearly defined what constitutes a topographical constraint. So I think that was language that was already in there, but I'd have to look at the exact line. So if you want to tell us which one that is, I can look.
It appears several times. I'm looking at 17.20.40B, 1740.20B, but it appears several times in the document. That particular discussion, I believe.
I've found it. Mary, I can speak a little to it. So the change there to make that language more clear and objective is that the standard was it deferred to a site study prepared by a licensed engineer or land surveyor in order to demonstrate that topographic constraints would prevent someone from developing as would otherwise be allowed. And so they basically the way that is made clear and objective is by deferring that to a technical study that is done. And so that's how the requirement changes rather than just sort of having a vague sort of statement about topographic constraints. There's now some more specific requirement that a study be done and shown that topographic constraints would prevent someone from building because of the view shed.
So with regards to view lines, your suggestion to us is that it would have to be quantitative rather than qualitative in terms of any protection for view lines?
Yeah, the language would have to be clear enough that it would show that no matter who's reading it, they would apply it the same way. So quantitative is a good way to do that, yes.
Regarding clear and objective standards, there are a number of instances in which the language is subjective in terms of referring to aesthetics and unique character, unique natural appearance and so forth. I was just wondering how that aligned with clear and objective standards, because aesthetic considerations could be seen as inherently subjective rather than clear and objective.
So there is a nuance with the state's requirements for clear and objective. You have to have a clear and objective path and clear and objective standards for residential development. In addition to that, you may also have an elective subjective path. So in some cases, in the architectural review overlay, for example, there is the clear and objective path for housing where there are clear and objective standards, but at the applicant's choice, they could also follow a discretionary path, and that's where there is still some language about aesthetics and the more subjective way to do it. So it meets clear and objective because there is the clear and objective path, but the way you can still keep some of that in is a voluntary other tract that is discretionary.
Some of the language doesn't appear to be voluntary. So under planned unit development, page 23, the verbiage is the fact that it will result in a safe, functional, and attractive development. For residential R1 zone, page 31, will reduce the quality and value of these areas for residential purposes. On page 40, CD1, to recognize the scenic and unique qualities of Bandon's oceanfront and nearby areas, and to maintain these qualities as much as possible by carefully controlling the nature and scale of future development in this zone. Page 44, Control Development 2, to protect and enhance the
Sorry,
unique
go ahead.
character, natural resources, and habitat characteristics of the Bandon Jetty and its bluff area, to provide for the development of a coastal village atmosphere, and to exclude those uses which would be inconsistent with the area's character. CD3, page 48, to provide appropriate development opportunities in the entryway to the South Jetty area while protecting and enhancing its unique natural resources. CDR1, page 52, the scenic and unique qualities of the view areas and maintain nearby properties overlooking the jetty area, the Coquille River, and Old Town, to maintain these qualities as much as possible by carefully controlling the nature and scale of development in this zone. The vistas and residential character of this zone, of this area, shall be protected by carefully controlling development in this zone. There's similar language for CDR2 on page 56. On page 60 for Old Town, commercial C1, serve the residents and visitors to the area intended to exclude those uses that would detract from its appeal as an aesthetically pleasing commercial district for residents and visitors. And similarly for general commercial C2 zone, there's similar language.
So that's another good question. So that's actually another nuance. Those are the intent statements for the different zone districts, but those intent statements describe what that zone district is for. They are not specific development regulations that are applicable to housing development. So they're not the actual development standard. They're describing the intent for each of the districts. So because they're not the standard, they can use the subjective language because it's not the actual standard that it would be implementing that description for the district.
Well, when words are used like to limit and to exclude, that would appear to be a constraint.
Those words do sound that way, yes. They are not used in the specific development standard that would apply to a housing development. They're describing the intent of those standards. So when it's describing the intent for R2 to limit something, that's done by the clear and objective and numerical standards in the regulations for development in R2. So it's describing what those regulations do. They limit.
So there are clear and objective standards for what's considered to be aesthetically pleasing.
So in that situation, the intent is that it would be aesthetically pleasing. We base what a clear and objective standard to get there on feedback from the community. So scale and orientation and transparency, windows facing the street to get to aesthetically pleasing. So that we translate what the goal for what makes it aesthetically pleasing is based on what we're hearing from what the community wants, and the proposed standards and the proposed design standards that are clear and objective combine to make it more aesthetically pleasing based on clear and objective standards.
I'm so tired of those two words.
I know, right?
So a layman coming in and looking at this, excuse me, ma'am. So a layman coming in, looking at this code, could tell what your intent is by reading it? Does it specifically state, this is the intent of this, whatever section it is?
That might be a good edit that we can make to make it more clear that that is the intent when it is the description of the zone district.
I personally think it would be a good change just because someone coming in that's not familiar, out of town, first time reading a document like this, they're not going to know what that intent is, or if that's supposed to be the intent of that section.
Yeah, that sounds like a good usability edit.
And I want to go back, Bill, when we were talking about view corridors, in the document that you read, you said something like shall.
Yes.
Do you recommend we should take out shall?
I think it needs, I think to make it clear and objective, I think that's where the ball got batted back and forth over the years, is that we never said definitively shall
Right.
be or must be.
Right. So
But
now
I-
it's time
but
we
I-
should probably do it.
I would leave it like that, but I
Leave the shall in.
leave the shall in, but I'm not sure I agree with giving an allowance for topographic reasons to block that view. I think that we get back now to something that's somewhat subjective, even though it's calling for an analysis by a civil engineer or someone. Does that make sense?
It does to me, yeah.
So you buy a piece of property, you know it has
Yeah.
topographic or geographic limitations, but now you want to build on it and block your neighbor's view.
Okay,
That's how
so,
I look at it. I know that's simplistic, but
so the way that you have proposed to write this would cover all of that? I'm talking to Cascadia now, sorry.
Jamin, do you want to jump in on some of that? See if
Anthony?
you can clarify more. You're muted, Jamin.
Sorry about that. Can you point me to which specific view protection section you're looking at? Just to make, there's a few of them.
yeah, there's a couple that I saw.
Page
Let's see.
53.
I have it at page 38, which would be 17.20.40,
Right,
section B,
yeah.
and
Give me
also
one.
page 54, which would be
Yeah, okay.
17.36.30, section A. I'm sorry, dot 40, section A, 173640A.
Yeah, so let me see if I can sum up what I'm hearing is that there is some concern that the allowing for someone to justify building into a view shed based on an analysis of topographical constraints remains too subjective or maybe too permissive than would be ideal. Is that your feedback?
Yes,
Yeah, I think so.
that's how I
Okay.
look at it. I'm not sure what other.
Okay.
Oh, I agree. I don't.
Sure. Yeah, this is a sort of a tricky one to make clear and objective, and this was our best guess at it right now, our best sure shot at it right now. But I think what we can do is we can go back and look at some other ways to make this particular standard clear and objective, while perhaps being a bit more stringent than it is today. I think it does probably make this standard a little more permissive. I can see why you'd have some concerns about that. So if you give some time to look at it more closely, we can see if there's another way to prepare this. So it would be a little bit more restrictive and, might offer a more quantifiable standard. And again, with that two-track approach that Mary laid out. So you can have a pretty prescriptive objective standard. So let's say if you have a slope of over X%, then you can build into the view shed, right? But then you may require, if you want to build into the view shed and you have a slope less than that, then you have to apply for a sort of discretionary permit or meet some discretionary criteria.
Okay.
So we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be possible? oh, Excuse me. Would it be possible to take a look at the, for me, somewhat confusing mixture of subjective and objective language in terms of some of these intents and goals and limitations? Because I understand clear and objective, which would be a mathematical standard, and a standard which is clear and objective, as opposed to the standards that are actually in the passages that I cited, which are clearly quite subjective and could mean different things to different people, which could lead to confusion and disputes that perhaps we could avoid.
Let me offer, we can take another pass through and look for some of those subjective terms you're referring to, but I want to be clear that those purpose statements you're referring to, there really is no way to make those clear and objective. They're describing a general characteristic of an entire neighborhood or area. Those are almost always in every development code not clear and objective. They're descriptive in some way, but they aren't used as a regulation that's applied to every development. They are describing the intent behind all of the regulations that are in that section. And so it's really not worth it to try to make.
Perhaps it can be made clear that it's a vision, that it's a goal, that it's an interest, as opposed to being some of the verbiage here, which refers to facts and limitations, which seem to be setting standards rather than setting goals.
Yeah, it's a generally accepted that a purpose statement in a development code is not a regulation. In almost every instance you're talking about there, it starts with the term purpose. So that's the identifier that says this is a goal, this is a vision for what these regulations are hoping to achieve, but it's not a regulation itself.
Yeah.
Commissioner Friedland, I think that also when we get this docket back, if that's something that the commission and the counselors are really concerned about, that's something as us as a group and a work session can go through with the help of our other people over there. Could sit down and maybe help us make those more to what everybody's liking.
Sure.
Instead of wasting their time on doing the intent part, I think we could handle
Yes,
that part.
we never want to waste anyone's time. It's too precious.
Would that work, Jamin?
Yes, it definitely would.
Okay, everybody, this is your last chance.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
I want to point out too that we did have some varying opinions on the design standards that are included in the amendments. And so that was question 5 we have here. And so we'd be open to your input and direction there. If I could just sum up what we did. So we proposed some design standards which are clear and objective. And they regulate some fairly basic elements of site and architectural design. They don't get into a lot for example, the materials that are used on the siding or the architectural style of the home or the roof pitch of the home, things like that have to do more with aesthetic character. Really the intent behind these is to prevent some of the more egregious outcomes of a poorly designed development that doesn't sort of blend into a typical neighborhood. So that's what we were hoping to do there, because we've had some different opinions and sort of direction on whether or not the abandoned zoning code should regulate design, right? And it didn't regulate design much today. So what we're trying to do is strike that balance of having some sort of baseline standards in there that will ensure good site and building design, but they are not very prescriptive. There's a lot of different ways you could meet them.
Matt, you had a question?
Yes. I can ask it? Great. Um, I'm still having a hard time with figuring out as I go through all this code amendments, which of that is required and which of those are optional. In other words, there's a lot of stuff in here that we don't have any say over.
Right.
It seems to me that there's a lot of stuff that's kind of left up in the air, I guess. But in your chart here, I'm looking at this use regulations chart,
Your
which
mic.
is really handy. Pardon? Uh, so, for example, I don't think you have, except up in I don't even know if it's anywhere in here. A lot of these different dwelling types and that thing are currently conditional use, but you're recommending is that they're permitted uses. Is that because the state statutes require that?
Yeah, this is a little nuanced, so let me see if I can get it right. So the state statutes require that, like we've been discussing, you have a clear and objective approval pathway for housing wherever it is permitted use. And the conflict with those statutes with a conditional use permit comes in at that point, because a conditional use permit is something that is reviewed against the approval criteria for it are not clear and objective. They're not really something that is appropriate to make clear and objective. There's a reason it's a conditional use permit. It depends on a number of different conditions. And so there will be some very broad statements about compatibility with adjacent properties and limiting impact on adjacent properties. And so requiring a conditional use permit is not really viable from a state law perspective for a housing development. So the choice then to be made is either to permit that housing type and apply clear and objective standards to it. And some of these design standards are intended to be a more objective way to regulate things that conditional use permit probably was going to try to regulate. So for most of those housing types, the city does have an option to simply prohibit them rather than allow them as a conditional use. You're sort of at a fork here where you have to choose either permitting them or prohibiting them. Based on the direction we've received from staff and the advisory committee and some of the response from the community, was our judgment that it'd be consistent with Bandon's sort of policy goals to allow these housing types, but to apply some clear and objective design standards to them.
Okay, now that makes perfectly good sense. A good explanation. Thank you very much. At least I understand it. So, what are the requirements for parking surfacing in here? I guess you allow gravel parking in a residential zone like R1 or R2.
Gravel driveways are okay.
Well, they're not. To me, they're not the least bit acceptable. And I'll tell you, if you would want to come by my house, I'll show you some of the neighbors, at least the one across the street, and I've noticed it occasionally, but that one in particular, because I see it every day. That gravel is tearing up the street. Tim will agree. I mean, gravel driveways going up the pavement, you're going to track that gravel out into the street and it tears them up. But not only by that person backing out, but anybody else who goes down the street is now grinding that gravel into that pavement.
Just like Moore Mill's doing to Riverside Drive.
Yeah. I mean,
Same thing.
I mean, but that's local. I think we can.
pardon?
We can change that one.
Well, I'm sure we can. I'm suggesting that, but I was asking, you know, what all's provided here in all the various types of housing units. You know, we've got cottage and single family and multifamily and several of them. And I just wondered if you allow gravel driveways backing into the street, it's going to tear those streets up. It will. I mean, it has. Well, Tim agrees. Running gravel out in a paved street isn't a good idea. I believe all driveways should be paved and hard surfaced. Of course, I feel all parking lots should be too. I mean, the city put in a parking lot down here and they paved it there and leave it gravel because I think there's a big difference in how the community appears. I mean, I think we need to keep in mind that just permitting all these different housing units and not addressing things such as that, or maybe you're allowing gravel. I mean, I think I got a nod that you're allowing gravel driveways.
You know, I don't recall, and I don't recall that we actually, if the code does permit it today, and whether we change that or not. Mary, were you able to locate that?
It's called out in the architectural review overlay as acceptable, and that's the way the code is now. And so we put that in the clear and objective standards as well. So that's just in downtown. It's just in the architectural review overlay where that's called out as okay. And it's in the design standards, both the clear and objective and the discretionary path there.
So like in the R1 and R2 in those zones, they're required to be paved driveways?
Hard surface.
Hard surface.
Right. I think they said cobblestone or.
Well, gravel doesn't count as hard surface to me, but maybe it does to other people. I'd defer a lot of this to Tim over here, who's kind enough to make this meeting, and he's got plenty to do besides meet. He's got tons of stuff to do. I don't know how you handle it all, but you do.
Do we want to have Cascadia change that part?
I'd like to see require, not only for the sake of the streets and not only for the sake of the people that are living there, but in terms of just the ambiance, if you were, or the appearance of the community, or however you want to call it, that we've been trying to, I think, foster a certain image that gravel driveways, yeah, it costs more to put a driveway in, hard surface it, but it also costs a lot more to buy lots and buy houses and all that stuff. So I feel they should all be paved.
I disagree.
I understand that.
I think,
Because if you'll come over to my house, you know where I live? I'll tell you, 999 Indiana Avenue. And I will show you on the ground
Just go to Moore Mill and Riverside Drive,
what the problem is.
right there, right in your face. Okay, does this committee want to do a consensus on the driveway material so they can change it before their final draft? Yes, no?
Yep.
I agree.
no,
No,
Yes. No.
I said no.
Oh, Archie?
Live on agreement. I don't have an opinion on it.
Okay. So I didn't count. Did anybody, Jerry, that's your job? Counted the yeses. So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Okay, we're not going to do that. So we'll leave that behind. We can do that later.
we can always discuss it further and change it if necessary.
Yeah, because we're gonna have another meeting like this. So yeah, we can do it then and have
If
staff.
it's another,
Okay. Do we have anything? Go ahead, Matt.
okay, if it's another meeting like this, why can't we discuss it here?
'cause we're not ready to make it your way right now.
No, I understand that, but
Then ask.
I'll give you my address, and anybody that wants to come by, I'll show you what a mess a gravel driveway can cause to the street.
I agree with you 1,000%, Matt.
I
Thank
have.
you. But do we need to keep Cascadia here
Okay,
because
Oh.
we're going to be doing this ourselves. So I'm just
Right.
thinking of what do we have for them right now?
I have a quick question. Some of your setbacks seem to address what we call vision triangles or vision safety triangles, and you're recommending a reduction from 15 feet to 10 feet. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
20.
Sometimes 20 to 10. Yeah.
20 to
20?
10 and
Yeah, because the industry
10.
standard is a minimum of 15, I believe. So I'm questioning whether we want to reduce a vision triangle setback to 10 feet.
So
Mary,
those,
do you want to take that?
yeah,
Why
so
did you
those
guys come up with
vision,
that?
those vision triangles are for safety with vehicles turning and backing out and pedestrians. So those vision triangles will supersede the setbacks themselves. So they will stack on top of each other. So you'll get the base setbacks, and then where you need those vision triangles for safety, just that triangle will have the additional setback area.
So it supersedes the 10 feet.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
you'll still get that vision clarity for safety.
Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
good, thank you.
Who is? Oh,
One last question. On
Yeah.
the last page of the document, it kind of tied into something you mentioned earlier. It talks about 25% as let me get to that page. 25, if a property contains a slope of 25% or greater,
That's pretty steep.
then it cannot be, it says affordable housing, which is interesting. So you're saying if it wasn't affordable housing, first of all, and your slope was 30%, you could build there? Or are you saying no housing should be built there? And why do we come up with 25%? And finally, is it 25% the total area or just part of the area? In other words, if I had level ground on 80% of my property and a slope ending in 25%, I'm presuming I could still construct on that 80%. That's level property. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this section is specific allowances for affordable housing.
Affordable
So
housing.
if you're developing affordable housing, this section provides additional allowances, and that 25% slope is one of the qualifiers, but it just says the property contains a slope of 25% or greater. So that contains to me says that if part of it is 25% or greater, then that clause would come into effect. And these allowances for affordable housing are from the state and they are state required.
The state. Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of go back real quick with what Matt has been discussing. Is it possible for the final draft to present the recommendations in the draft that are required by the state specifically as opposed to other standards?
Yeah, like different, yeah.
Yeah, maybe different
Make that
color.
a
Good
different
idea.
color.
Something so it's very clear that this is I guess you'd say a non-negotiable change versus this is a recommended or a change to be considered.
Basically, we don't have to read the whole document. We see a certain color, we know we can't change it because the state says you can't. So that would help.
Sure. Yeah, let me offer, we tried to do that in the commentary, which is in purple italic text. That may kind of got lost there in some places, but those at the beginning of each chapter, there is some commentary explaining the reasoning for the amendments. We can modify those commentary sections there to color code or even put an icon or something like that to visually delineate between those amendments that are required by state law versus which are sort of a local option.
Really
Some of it
help.
will be a mix, but we can do that in the draft.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good idea, Bill.
It was.
Thank you.
What, commissioners or council, is there any other questions?
No?
Okay, Mr. Winkle, go.
I go?
Yes,
Thank you.
finish up.
For there's been a lot of, there's a lot of wording in here and a lot of talk about affordable housing and workforce housing and all that. What is that in dollar amounts? Do you know?
A certain percentage of the median income.
Yeah, it's a question we get often. So it depends on what context it is used in. But usually when you're saying affordable housing, sometimes we call it capital A affordable housing. That is a housing that does have some kind of income restriction on the occupants. And so that provision we were just looking at, that is an example of if the development is for true affordable income restricted, or sometimes called deed restricted housing. So there's a requirement that people who live in there, those units, don't have above a maximum income level. So that income level is usually somewhere at 60% of the area median income or 80% of the area median income, sort of the maximum income level for affordable housing. When we use the term workforce housing, we're usually referring to there is housing that's generally affordable at like the median income. So you might think of the range of incomes there as between 80% of the area median income up to maybe 120% of the area median income, right? Which would capture a lot of people that are sort of in the middle average income people in the community. And those are often people that work in the community and that need those housing options. So those are when we say affordable or workforce, that's generally what we're referring to. Sometimes we may say more affordable housing types. In that case, we're just saying that they're more affordable than the alternative, right? So maybe a multifamily housing is generally going to be more affordable than single family housing. It doesn't mean it will be affordable to everyone, but it'll be relatively more affordable.
So there's no real dollar figure that anybody could apply. In other words, if I came in here and I'm going to build $50 million affordable homes, do people have to go back and figure that out, or is there a dollar amount? We use the word affordable, we use the word work housing, we use the word percentage of. I don't know how you figure all that stuff out, but if there was a dollar figure, I'm just asking you in terms of your expertise that we could look at, and say, okay, we're looking for homes in the $300,000 to $350,000 range, or we're looking at $500,000, or do you know what that is, or have any idea?
Yeah, we did actually have a slide on that in one of our previous presentations. I don't think we included it here, but yeah. So when we say percentage of the area median income, you take your income, and then it is considered to be housing is considered to be affordable if it costs less than 30% of your income. So then you can sort of do the math and figure out what would be the maximum rent or sale price that would be affordable to someone at that income level. So that's how that math is done. If someone's building something where they have an affordability requirement, they'll have to go through that process and sort of certify that they're meeting those requirements. In our case, we did, I think, present some information on what would be more affordable to an average household in Bandon. I don't have those numbers at the tip of my fingers, but I would say probably if we're talking about an affordable sale price, somewhere in the ranges of 200 to 300,000 would be affordable to someone at the median income.
Okay, that was a figure I was looking for. Thank you.
Affordable housing was always assumed to be Section 8 housing. I mean, that's been standard in the industry for years, so 30, 40 years. Is there another word we could put there besides affordable? Or that we could
depends the context you're using it in. The code, affordable is probably the best term because it does align with state law.
Okay.
So the
you gotta
parts
say
of the code that
with
were
state law. Okay.
it'd be better. It'd be more clear for anyone using the code. Yeah.
Okay.
Section 8 housing is a specific thing that is one form of affordable housing. It's done by vouchers though, rather than by project subsidies.
As long as the state says you got to do it, we got to do it. We're good. Anybody else? Let's get them while we got them. We done? Anybody?
Cascadia, do you have anything else for us that you want to go over?
I don't think so, but I'll defer to Ray and Mary if there's anything else that.
Not for me. I think we covered next steps well. It sounds like so we'll have our community meeting on Thursday and incorporate feedback from you all today and from the community into this kind of next draft that we'll hand off to the city. And that'll kind of close our engagement with you all. So I think we've talked about next steps. I think we just want to say thank you for the discussion and the feedback today. This has been really helpful for us as we get to that next version of the draft.
Question. What's your timeline after Thursday's town hall for completion of the final draft?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Mary, Jamin, I invite you to jump in as well. I think we want to, chat with city staff about kind of potentially coordinating with the contract planner coming in. And I'm not totally sure of his timeline or sort of level of involvement yet to overlap with us. Mary, I saw you jumped off mute. So if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Was pretty close to what I was going to say. I was just going to add in, we also want to take a look at all the feedback together to get a good sense of just how much changes there are to make to that public review draft too. So we'll follow up with staff on more details after the meeting, I think.
Okay.
Sounds fair.
All right, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Before council leaves, something I talked about with Mayor, this is separate and distinct from Cascadia. I would recommend or ask that council begin in the near term a discussion on the city or the community's response to a disaster such as happened yesterday at the apartments. I know that we used to have a CERT program that's been disbanded because we lost our main person, but I guess we're very happy that Red Cross apparently immediately moved in. I don't know if there's anything that the city should have in place to handle something that might unfortunately happen in the future, like the fires where one or more people are displaced.
Jen, could you put that on one of our agendas? Yep, write it down now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good? Anybody ready? Okay, you have to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned.
Bear, does your